Welcome to WEL Partners on Predatory Marriage, a limited podcast series. My name is Jacqueline, and I'm joined by Daphne Franks, a longtime advocate for better protections against predatory marriages. Now, getting a will revoked isn't the only reason predatory marriages happen, which people may or may not know is a thing that has and continues in some places to happen when someone gets married. It's automatic revocation of wills. But we've been talking, Daphne and I, and there are a lot of other reasons predatory marriages happen, including that even just in terms of getting property from people and extracting wealth, there are a lot of other ways that can happen through a predatory marriage. So there's a blog you're welcome to check out that's been written on some of those other ways predators might go about getting property through a predatory marriage. But today, Daphne and I are going to chat about some of the other people she's spoken with who've given permission to share their stories about times where just fixing legislation so that wills aren't revoked by marriage wouldn't have been or is not enough to fix the situation. So Daphne, would you be willing to share one of those stories with us now?
Absolutely. Over the past 10 years, I've spoken to hundreds of other people. They ring me really distraught, and sometimes it's even hard to follow what they're saying. And the predators really exploit. They say so and so's really hysterical. Well, they are once you've finished with them, they really are. And they say things like, and she did this, and she did that, and she did this, and nobody believes me because it sounds so far-fetched. When it's happening to you, you almost can't believe it's happening because it sounds so far-fetched. And I remember when it started happening, I spoke to my boss. I was then teacher at Leeds Medical School. I taught all the non-clinical topics
This
like
is
communication skills.
happening with this is when it started happening with your mom being involved in a predatory marriage?
Yes, when it started happening with mum. And I went and spoke to my boss just to make him aware that there was this weird thing going on at home. And the first thing he said is, well, I just said a few things he'd done. And this chap was a very, very experienced doctor who had seen loads of different things. And he said, well, he will probably be a narcissist or a sociopath or a psychopath. And if you tangle with him, you will come off worst because he's better at it than you. And so it proved. And all the other cases say the same thing. The things that they do can be really far-fetched. And also, I think ordinary people find it hard to believe that somebody is taking money um out of another person's bank account. You just can't get your head around it. You think this is something that happens in a television drama, not something that happens to you.
You just mentioned there one of the things we've chatted about is that it's not just, after the loved one is gone and passed away that someone's
No,
money.
no,
It's not that the kids want money to be left in the bank. Sometimes perpetrators are taking money while the loved one is still alive and needs it for care. Do you have any,
absolutely.
yeah, do you have any insight on, I guess, cases where you've
Absolutely. There was a case called Jill Langley, and that is a very well-known case, though I am in constant contact with Jill. And her predator had been taking money out of her father's bank account. This is a female predator. Most of the predators seem to be female, not all, but most. And she apparently took out 230,000. And I think because she is Chinese and I think she might have um, funneled it back to China or certainly lost it. They are very good at that kind of thing. So it's not just a question of marriage revoking a will, it's a question of how do you get people believed beforehand? In Jill Langley's case, I might as well carry on talking about her. Um, Her father was 94 at the time of the marriage, and the carer was 54. Okay, I always say there are many happy marriages with big age gaps, but when one party is so big, I think that is a huge red flag. Somehow, the marriage went ahead okay, even though the man had a lot of delusional beliefs. he believed that by the time the predator had finished grooming him, he believed that Jill, the daughter, had stolen his horses, that he'd been a major in the army, all sorts of weird things. But nevertheless, I suspect because of the lack of training of registrars, they managed to get through the marriage. And it was only when she got him to change his will. And at that point, it was picked up. And Jill took him to court, or took her to court. But as Jill constantly says, she won. The predator was found guilty of undue influence, because that is the main thing that they do: undue influence, grooming, gaslighting. That is what they do. And Jill constantly says to me, I hear from her about twice a week, and she always says, why, when this woman has been found guilty 18 months ago, is she still living in my dad's house and I haven't had a penny back of the court costs? The wheels of the law move very, very slowly.
And I guess, is that what you were kind of saying earlier when, if I understood what you meant correctly, you were saying, predators on the whole are very good about putting resources outside of the reach of local jurisdictions.
Yes, they are. Yeah, they are.
So,
And they're very good at sorry.
Oh no, go on, go on.
I was just going to say they're very good at choosing where and when to and who to target. I'm convinced we were targeted because we were fairly easygoing and don't like conflict. I think a lot of the people targeted are sort of nice people who don't like conflict. But another case, who I'll call Nikki because that's her name, she's happy for me to share the story, is her father, the marriage took place in New Zealand. And in New Zealand, as in England, you can put a caveat in place if you're worried about the marriage, and that should stop it until they've investigated. The caveat is put onto the registrars. So they put on this caveat in New Zealand. But unfortunately, the person who dealt with caveats was off sick. And so the marriage just went ahead. And it seems to me that lack of robust procedures all over the place is one of the big problems here. Uh, the cases that have succeeded, such as Jill Langley, have been ones where they're very, very, very extreme. The ones, for example, there was a case in this country, and I don't know this person, but this case has been all over the news, so I can talk about it. As somebody called, the case was called Ray BU. The person had the initials BU. And that one, again, it was an age gap. And in this case, it was a predatory male. And the woman, who was a lot older than him, again, I think only about 20 years this time, absolutely adored him, thought he was marvelous, thought he was wonderful. But meanwhile, he was grooming her and taking all her money. And it was so difficult for the family because they had to, to actually bring about a court case to get the person banned from seeing the woman who wanted to see him. And the judge actually commented in court, under the Mental Capacity Act in this country, you have the right to make an unwise decision. So if she had been in sound mind, she had the complete right to give him all the money if she wanted. But I feel, and I increasingly feel, that does not take into account grooming and gaslighting and undue influence and coercive control, because it's all very well. One of the cases, Nikki said, the Court of Protection, they went to the Court of Protection and they just look at capacity. Did he have capacity? Simple decision. They thought he had capacity to marry. Even the court psychiatrist thought he had capacity to marry. That wasn't what Nikki was objecting to. But it was the fact that the predator had groomed him, isolated him, kept him away from the family. They all seem to do that. They're keeping them away from the family. And so it is that all the other things, it's not just about capacity. And I've spoken to quite a few psychiatrists who say capacity shouldn't be assessed as a snapshot anyway. I know that capacity can really fluctuate, particularly with some forms of dementia, such as Alzheimer's disease. There are things like sundowning, which is a phenomenon we have here. You maybe have it there. It's maybe a known term there as well, where
Just
people with Alzheimer's get a bit more confused.
yeah, where I was just going to say the same thing in case anyone happened to watch this and not know the term.
Yes,
Yeah, it's
yes, sundowning.
like when someone takes medication. That's why it's
Yeah,
very, at least here, the court approach is very, capacity is time and situation specific. So,
yeah,
it would matter if at the time they entered into the marriage, whether or not, like in the case of your mom, if she didn't even know the name of the guy she was getting married to at that specific time, then, it would not have been possible. But maybe with supports for capacity, someone who has dementia and is in a loving relationship might be able to, on a good day and early in the morning, fully enter into a relationship. Again, whether or not it's a good decision for them, they have the right to make, everyone
yes.
make decisions that
And
necessarily
in
will
this,
be wise.
absolutely. And in this country, it's known as time specific and decision specific. So, not you, I think you said time specific and situation specific, which is about the same thing, isn't it? But I suppose my point here is I've spoken to another case where, like my mum, the person got married one day and didn't know they were married the next day. Now, should that marriage be valid? And I think this is where the Mental Capacity Act falls down a bit, really, um, because if you spoke to any layperson, they'd go, "Oh no, that's ridiculous. It shouldn't." But under the terms of the Mental Capacity Act, it is. It is a tricky one. Um, but one case I spoke to found out about the marriage because she went to visit her father, and on the mantelpiece there were lots of congratulations on your marriage cards. And so she said, "Dad, what's this about?" And he said, "Oh, done something terrible." And he had no memory at all. Um, so, and yet the huge inheritances can um, depend on such little details of whether should capacity be assessed as a snapshot, which it is at marriage. I'm not convinced it should, and I've spoken to quite a few psychiatrists as well who say it should be assessed as a process. But that's the way the law works at the moment, and it's very, very tricky. Um, so there's another thing that people do, which is kidnap the old person. They wouldn't call it that, but that is effectively what they do. One case, again, I've become very friendly with her. She was living in one part of the country and the predator moved in, a female predator. She went to the police, who, as often, didn't understand the situation and rang her up and said, "Oh, your father's living in a lovely home, so I'm sure it's fine." And they just didn't have the training to understand it. And the next thing that happened was suddenly her father had moved right across the country, hundreds of miles away. She still doesn't know where he lives. And her father, she suspects he has dementia, but the woman has not had him diagnosed. And that is another very key point. The predators are always reluctant to involve medical professionals. They keep them right away as far as possible. But she's convinced that he does have dementia, and but he has retained enough capacity to know who his family are and to be groomed into believing that they're all evil and all hate him and all just want the money. And that is absolute classic with all the cases. And that was the same with Nikki, her father. They like us, had been a very, very close family. And yet suddenly the father was saying, I don't trust you. I'm going to remove your power of attorney. And the power of attorney was removed. And then basically the predators are so convincing that everything they they seem to succeed with. Um, Sometimes people like social services do what they can, like raising a vulnerable adult alert, but it often doesn't come to anything because it kind of fizzles out and they just don't know what to do. In Nikki's case, she was talking to the bank and saying, look, this woman is taking hundreds of thousands of pounds out of his bank. And the bank said, well, we don't know what to do about this, so we're going to freeze the account and you need to take legal advice. But it would be good if banks knew more about what to do about it in those circumstances.
Yeah, so it sounds like while people are alive and they need those resources, it's a concern. And then you also like to, sometimes there is an inheritance. And I guess even if kids don't necessarily care about the money itself, they might care, what they knew their capable parents' intention was for how they wanted to spend the last years of their life and how they wanted to spend that money. Am I kind of correct in getting that that's also a factor?
It's absolutely a factor. I mean, both my parents were from really, really poor backgrounds, and every penny they had earned. And the fact that it's gone to this predator really upsets me. We had never relied on the inheritance. We are, believe me, at the poorer end of predatory marriages. In fact, I've had a lot of solicitors say to me, well, it was a comparatively small estate. Yeah, we've lost about £400,000. That's not a little amount to us, but it is to some, compared with some cases, which can be 10 million, 5 million. Jill Langley's father was a multimillionaire. I know that Nikki's family were very wealthy. Her husband had a very, very senior job. For her, it really wasn't about the money because they had plenty of money, but they went to court for the principle because they just couldn't bear it. Um, and there are plenty of ways that predators can take money without marriage revoking a will. And I think that's borne out by the fact that I did a talk in Scotland for the National Association of Registrars up there. Marriage doesn't revoke a will in Scotland, which is great. And I haven't heard of so many cases up there, but there are still lots of people emptying their relatives' bank accounts. Sometimes it is predatory children, but often it's a predatory partner just emptying the bank account. And the fact that I have done my talk a lot in Scotland suggests to me that they are aware it's happening, and yet marriage doesn't revoke a will there. Predators are brilliant at it. They're just so good. If there's a way of getting the money, they will get it. And there's this other thing going on as well, which I cannot emphasize too strongly. It's also they love the control. They absolutely love the control of every little bit of winning against the family, it's not just controlling the victim, it's controlling the wider family and friends as well, and kind of going, ah, and that's what our predator did all the time.
Not to end us off on a very dark note, but that appears to be what I'm doing anyway. Unfortunately, it's not a very cheerful topic, I suppose. But we're wrapping up on about 17 minutes. So I think that'll be our podcast for the day. But something Daphne has picked up on a lot throughout our talk today is patterns. There are a lot of patterns that Daphne has noticed being repeated between different predators, sometimes even predators repeating the same pattern over again, the same person doing it to someone else out in the open, and also patterns between what sometimes people will ignore from the outside looking in. So we're going to be talking a little bit about patterns next week. I encourage you to subscribe or follow wherever you listen to your podcasts. Until next time, stay safe and stay well.